tell you a bit something about myself. I started as a nerd, but now I have to lead people. And that led me to this journey about being a technical expert. I graduated as an engineer. Now I have to run a factory, actually two operations, with about 200 people under my wing. And so this is a particular episode where it's especially for those who would rather fix machines than fix people. You know what I mean. You're so comfortable with numbers, with processes, with data. Now you have to deal with carbon life forms, people. And this also for those HR business partners who wants to help them. So I hope to give you ideas how to help such talent. These are the promising ones, the ones wherein they have a lot of knowledge in their heads, but now they have to multiply their effectiveness through teams or through divisions. And this is now where we come in, wherein you may be coming in as an individual contributor. For example, you come in as a quality inspector or a machine operator or an accountant, maybe even a salesperson. Then all of a sudden, maybe through some good fortune, or maybe your boss saw something in you, congratulations, you've been appointed as a supervisor, a team leader, maybe even a department head. And therefore, you may be in a state of panic. I'd rather crunch numbers rather than leading people through crunch time. What do you then? And you'll realize that as you go up the corporate ladder, being technical can only do so far. Sometimes now you have this idea that there's more than just machine knowledge or knowledge about spreadsheet, nor about, let's say, having this market research or this customer base. Now you have to deal with a new element. It's like being transported to an alien planet where you have this consciousness that you need more skills. And that's where now, today, we're going to have skills that help you transition from a technical expert to a leader. And this is my journey. I graduated as a chemical engineer from De La Salle University. And why? Because I love math and science. Numbers, for some reason, turned me on. But I was a nerd, remember? I grew up as an only child reading American comic books. So while those neighbor kids out there are playing basketball, for the life of me, I cannot even dribble a basketball, but all I want to do is to read books, comic books, and watch science fiction TV shows. And therefore, since I want to have this lucrative career using my math skills and science skills, I chose engineering. After having my 5 years of hard labor at the college, I had my degree and I had a job, my first job as a cadet engineer in a manufacturing firm. So my next skill was to understand how the machines work. But then I realized something. This is something which college I don't think prepared me for. I had to handle people because I'm not going to run the machines myself. So I found myself as a shift supervisor, having to manage all these people who probably have not even finished college, but they know the process better than I do. And so now I have to level up to know how to become a supervisor. Then later on, I realized that I have to communicate well because then I know what I want. I'm not so sure what they know. I'm not so sure if they know what I want. So communication, I felt early on, was a critical skill. And speaking of skill, of course, in every place, whether factory, hospital, always, there will always be problems. And the next critical skill I had to develop was critical thinking and PSDM, problem solving and decision making. Don't you wish in the college level there's a special course for PSDM? I think it's about time we should have that. And that also led me to, there's so many things to do now. The higher I go up, the more projects they give me, the more responsibilities they give me, and now I have to prioritize. And I have to have more skills in time management. Then I realized something. No man is an island. So now I have to come out of my shell. Remember, I was a nerd, only child. Now I have to spread my wings and contact people and then establish my network. It's not just the network about other people in the same organization. It's also getting to know people outside the organization. People that can call, for example, for advice or for help. And then after that, I realized something else. You know, we all have feelings. Feelings, nothing more than feelings. And that led me to realize I need emotional intelligence. IQ, I think I got it right. EQ is something that I realized I've developed. We'll get to that later on. And then as I go further up, remember by this time now I'm running a factory. All of a sudden, 200 people's lives are on my hands, whether my plans will make or break the business. And that's where now to go into strategic thinking, strategic planning. And last but not least, I realized in my pinnacle of my career, I need to help people grow. And that's where I discovered and fell in love with coaching and mentoring. The point, as you see, whether you are coming up the ladder as a leader, manager, maybe even later on you're going to be in the C-suite, you need more and more soft skill. And that's where we come into the point wherein we realize that there is something more beyond your technical world. And if this were a workshop, I would invite you, if you're a technical person, to reflect and be aware of what is out there, outside of your cubicle, outside of your computer, your office, your laboratory. What would be the people that you deal with? What new KPIs that you have to attain? And therefore, what new set of skills must you have? And this is where we're going to share what will be those skills. But let me also go to this particular concept. If you are into the technical world, it's something like a comfort zone because you know your stuff. And when you deal with process, there's a certain security blanket to it because the process, by definition, is something that you can control, or at least you wish you can control. Okay, cause and effect. If A, then B. Always if A, then B. Therefore, you can control and you can quantify because you can always measure a certain quantity of material, a certain percentage of efficiency, all those things. And by the way, some of you may be thinking that if you cannot measure it, it doesn't exist. There are companies like that. And that's where it's nirvana for technical people because I can see, I can measure, I can control. And not only that, because the whole thing assumes that it is repeatable, it is stabilized, and therefore your process is something which you can predict. Always this will happen under these conditions. That is paradise for the technical people. Minimum hassle. And if there's something goes wrong, remember, I'll rather fix machines or rather crunch numbers. Then you are a leader. Then you're stepping out of your comfort zone, and instead of process, you're now dealing with people. And you do not control people actually. You think you do. If let's say you tell somebody to do something, he does it. Well, yeah, but what if that person, has issues with being passive aggressive? He does not follow you to the letter. In fact, he deviates from your instruction, or worse, he's downright rebellious. You will realize that you really cannot control people. You can only lead them. Not only that, how can you quantify people? Okay, this now where, yeah, you can probably make a scale of 1 to 10, all those things about behavior or attitude, but at the end of the day, there are certain intangible things, very abstract comparatively, like motivation, initiative. How can you measure malasakit? And that's where you now have these qualitative issues of dealing with people. How you wish you can program people like you program a computer. Because sometimes people can be unpredictable, correct? How many times have you depended on somebody to turn in a report and he or she was late? Or he calls in sick? Or worse, he tells you, I'm going to another company, maybe even a competitor. And that's where now comes this relatively messy state of handling people as you graduate into leadership. But don't fear, the rest of this webinar will help you give some clues how to minimize the risk and maximize your effectivity. Now, by this time, you'll be aware of the distinction between hard skill and soft skill. Hard skill is something that you can show with a certificate or diploma. It's a skill that can be measured, typing, inspection quality, machine quality, acumen in terms of analyzing financial statement, and so on. Soft skill is a little bit more out there, like emotional intelligence, persuasion. I heard a while ago that you must be an inspiring leader. How can you measure inspiring? And that's where we come to the point wherein we step out of our comfort zone into relatively shifting territory wherein we may make mistakes, but that's okay because we're learning as we go along. Now, what will happen is this: we will have three recommendations when it comes to leading people coming from a technical standpoint. The three recommendations, the three no banes, which I ask you to learn. Three things: emotional intelligence, leadership communications, business sense. Now, you may be surprised at some of them, so let's dig in. Now, I will tell you who is my childhood friend. Yes, remember I was a nerd. I love Star Trek. I consume science fiction. And there's something about Mr. Spock that appealed to my temperament. Wow, I wish I were this logical person, very cerebral, never be swayed by fear or worry, maybe even desire. And come on, sometimes don't you think that modern day politics or even the environment can be a bit more rational? And yet, however, as I wanted to emulate Mr. Spock, I realized that, hey, in the real world, we deal with people who are emotional beings. Newsflash: we think that we are rational people, but actually, we decide based on emotions and justify them later with reason. Whatever we do, there's an underlying emotional reason behind it. We may say that we're very logical, but we're driven by either two things: pain or pleasure. It's up to you now which lever to pull, the carrot or the stick. And that was my realization wherein I need to develop my emotional intelligence. Now, I like this to become experiential. I don't want to give you moderate statements. So let me give you a story. This happened only about October, where I had to really practice emotional intelligence. And this guy needed emotional intelligence. Let's call him Tony. Tony is a department head of mine. And we had this 360 wherein his workers say, Tony shouts at us. He thinks that he's only the guy with the answer. We feel like Bobo and all that. And so, needless to say, the natives are restless. And I had to really coach Tony how to do it. And surprise, surprise, Tony would say, what's wrong with my style? You have the thing about you can tell people where they're sort of not doing well, and then they say that it's okay because I can give all the justification. Tony will say that, but how will I make them behave? If I grow soft, they'll take advantage of me. And we have all this conversation in Filipino, paikot-ikot, until I had to go to this particular coaching question. Why do you think this is effective for you? Why is it that your style of berating people, belittling people, having this aura of a know-it-all, why do you think this is helpful for you? And he had this particular insight, which I think was revolutionary. He said, when I was at their rank, when I was still a maintenance worker, this was how my boss trained me. And if I can take it and look where I am now, I'm a department, why cannot they? Ah, so now I have an idea why Tony is like that. He thought it's the only way to go. And a little more reflection, like say, for example, okay, Tony, is everybody like you? Of course, not everybody's not like Tony. So, Tony, if let's say you do that to somebody else, would that somebody else behave and react the same as you? Sir, siguro hindi. Maybe not. And that led to little glimpses where now he realizes how dysfunctional his style can be. The point is that he began to become emotionally intelligent. And for that, he became a better leader. In fact, when we put him on another lateral promotion, do you know what he said after mending his ways, becoming more supportive, more listening, and more affirming? He said now that he's going to be transitioned to another role, he said that his people came to him and said, Sir, we will miss you. Please visit us from time to time. What a turnaround. And that's where now we have this particular thing about being technical, and now we have to think about being emotional. Many times we are so locked into our world and we deal with pure data and we forget about emotions. And we know what we want, we forget to think about what other people want. And guess what? We're not always on the same wavelength. And so this is one of those, I like this particular quadrant, and you can have a lot of resources about emotional intelligence, wherein it's basically the quadrant, for example, in the upper left, it is self-awareness. For Tony, he had to be aware of what he's doing, aware of his motivation, maybe even his fear, which made him behave that way, the tough boss, the brash, okay, the tough talking, berating boss. And then he had to be aware of how he's making other people think or feel. When he realized now from the 360, because the 360 is like a mirror in front of him, he began to realize how other people felt belittled, discouraged, feeling like trash, not inspired. And then he had to go to the other quadrant wherein now he had to be managing himself. So now whenever he had this frustration, and instead of blowing up, why cannot you people think? Why cannot you have answers? Now he had to really now be more calm and now be more collaborative, be supportive. And because of that, he's able to manage other people's emotions from adversarial to delegative. And therefore, everybody becomes more like a cohesive team. That's why at the end of the period, people now see Tony in a brand new way to the point that they're now bonds of friendship. And because that particular person with a strong technical capacity became more and more emotionally intelligent. So number one, if you want to transition from a nuts and bolts kind of guy, you have to become a heart and soul kind of guy too. And because of that, then you have the best of both worlds. Now, the next one, we talk about emotional intelligence. Now we talk about leadership communication because, hello, you're a leader. And it's not just any communication. And by the way, yeah, I heard the stereotype. Engineers, they need to be more communicative. They need to know how to let go of jargon. They have to know how to deal with non-technical people. And even as simple as saying A becomes B becomes C. But in this case, you're a leader. And there's a certain dimension about the way you speak, the way you deliver a message, where it connotes leadership and influence. Now, let's take a look at some of them. And I promise you more stories. But listen here. What happens when people are poor communicators? You have a lot of disconnects. You have a lot of confusion, maybe even frustration, maybe even finger pointing. And KPIs will be missed. You may have rework, costly repair, maybe even damage customer relationships. That's why for leadership, communication is crucial. And by the way, good communicators tend to have great emotional intelligence. So you see the connection. Because when you communicate, you're always aware of how you're feeling and how your audience, the person you're talking to, is feeling. And you now have to be aware and manage the environment and the atmosphere. For example, psychological safety. For example, collaboration. For example, being affirmative so that the people will do everything for you without fear, without any repercussion, because they respect you. And with respect usually comes love. And there's a bottom line of trust all around. So communication is key. And so what will be like some examples? So let me give you three. There's a lot more, but because of the time constraint, let me give you my favorite three, which served me well in my plant job. First would be direction, wherein you talk about, well, you're a leader. So by definition, you lead people. You tell them to go from point A to point B, basically. And the principle is this. You spell out very clearly who will do what when. That's super basic, I know. But you'll be surprised how many people violate that. And because of that, there's confusion. If needed, you have to explain why. Why is this going to be done? Because if you don't do it, then it's going to have a ripple effect for the rest of the team, maybe for the organization. It will impact sales or customers. And depending on your situation, there's such a thing called situational leadership. You may want to explain how. You got to be highly directive Or you may want to be say, okay, here's the goal. I trust you guys. Run the show. Get back to me for the decision. It depends. So the important thing is that you need to be clear as to who will do what and when. And I learned this also in an interesting scenario in a department. I was expecting them to do this. Okay, that can be actually a project. It's a project. And after about a few weeks, when I checked in, it's not yet being done. And I asked the department head why. Because we agreed that we'll do this market research, this particular data, so that we'll be able to tweak our production schedule accordingly. Why is it still not being done? And when we review their project charter, their action plans, this is what we saw. And I think when you see it, you can see what's wrong with it. There was an action plan. The task was to gather data on a timeline, June. But look at the people in charge. John, Elmer, Wally, Susan, Dan. And no wonder nothing got done. Because these 5 people thought the other guys will do it. There was no leader. There was no accountability. And that's why it's very important to have clarity who will do what, when, so that there's one person to be responsible. You can ask that person to be accountable if something goes well or goes wrong. And so the action point we did was to pinpoint only one guy, in this case, John. John will have to be the one to lead the other 4. Now, by the way, somebody will say, does the leader have to be an SME, a technical expert himself? Depends, but not necessarily. Because John, for example, may not know the nitty-gritty of gathering the data, but he knows how to get things done. And so what happens is that we appoint John to be the team leader, and it's his job to appoint his SMEs, in this case, the other 4, and then he's the one responsible to report to me and the organization what happened, what's the result, if there's any problem or progress. That's very key. It's also like delegation. You have to know exactly what you want the other person to do and even coach him if necessary. Direction, because of good communication, is key. Remember, you are leveraging your work through the strength of your team leaders, and therefore, clear messages, directions, KPIs is vital. Now, let's look at the second communication that speaks of leadership. Discussion, deliberation, whatever you call it. Because people will always have brainstorming, ideas to talk about, problems to solve. And this is something which perhaps new to you, it's this. The principle is to explore what is positive and possible. Let me repeat, positive and possible. Why is that? Do you have people who are naysayers? It cannot be done. We have no budget. We have no people. Upper management will turn it down. And it's kind of frustrating when you have like that. And so the principle, if you're a leader, is not just to hammer them with your technical knowledge, but to open their mind and to explore what is positive and possible. And if you're a coach, you know what I'm talking about. What can you do differently to solve the problem? What would it take to make this happen? Does it have to be what if, what else? And let me give you an example. Remember, I promised stories wherein we're going to have something concrete. And for example, you know that I handle a factory. And we had machines that are run by electronic controls. Bear with me here. These are the machines wherein we have people, program something into a panel, and then the controls will take over. And then from time to time, the machine would stop. Why? Something went wrong with the electronic controls. And what happened? We call in the technical guys. Okay, technicians, come here, fix the problem. And you know what they would do? Okay, there are probably 20 things that can go wrong in that control. So guess what? Okay, is it this one? Let me check. That's okay. Second one, it's okay. And what if they arrive at the 18th possibility, and that's when they solve the problem? But by that time, 2 hours would have gone. 2 hours of lost production and opportunity loss. And so because of that, I was saying, okay, we can work like this forever. I brought the team together and say, what would it take to shorten the troubleshooting time. Remember, you're not talking as a technical expert, but into leadership, where you're trying to facilitate the discussion. And you're now going to explore what is possible and positive. And one of the technicians said something like this: Sir, because these things have software, we do not have access to software. Oh, okay. So who has access to the software? Sir, it's the original supplier, the guys in Japan who gave us the machine. Okay, so how come they're giving us the machine but not the software? Sir, because that's their policy. Okay, now here comes the question. What will it take for them to share the software with us? And some of the technicians will say, no, it's because they have this policy, this proprietary, it's secret, because if they share with us the software, then they lose their leverage, because then they would say, we don't need them anymore. And that's why they probably will be afraid that we're going to have the software, give it to their competitors. Okay, so now we brainstorm some more. And we arrive at the concept of talking to the Japanese manufacturer and arrive at the NDA, non-disclosure agreement. We basically told the Japanese guys like this: Mr. So-and-so, we want to shorten our troubleshooting time through the electronic controls. If we have the software, we just type in something in the panel, and the panel automatically tells us where of the 20 things will go wrong. Please allow us access to the software. We'll have an agreement, this contract, where we'll keep the passwords and the systems in strict secrecy. And the Japanese guys, they have their upper management deliberation and finally said, okay, Nelson, we trust you. Here's the NDA, we signed it. And then they gave us the software. And guess what? The next time the machine comes out, our technicians can just type something, access the software, and said, okay, it is item number 12 that's wrong. So we went there, fixed item 12, rather than trying to see if items 1 to 11 are incorrect. Because of that, we're able to shorten our troubleshooting time. And the principle is this: you may have your own problems about delays or errors. And your job as the leader, especially if you have technical background, now you have to work solutions with people, explore what is positive and possible. When that happens, actually, you can practically solve every problem. And that, by the way, is your competitive edge against other people who are naysayers, pessimists, and complacent. So that's another thing. To become a leader, you must always have this mindset of discussing things towards solutions, what is positive and possible. There are more actually, but let me also share this last thing: decisions. Decisions, decisions, decisions. And then you realize one day, you cannot please everybody, correct? And lalo na, if there are other times wherein you have to make a call about giving this guy a bonus, giving this guy an approval of vacation leave, and you'll be asked, it's unfair. Why this guy, not that guy? And that's where you now have to make particular position as the leader. And if this thing worries you, because like I said, you'd rather fix machines than fix people, here's the good news. A Harvard Mystery School study says that the best way to do this is explain the decision process, and therefore you condition the brain of the audience that it was arrived at fairly in a balanced way, then say the decision. That's the best practice. You as a leader will have, of course, use your analytical superpower and craft the decision-making process to be fair. And then when it's time for the big reveal, you now first tell them the process the decision was made, then the decision. Because if you give the decision first, people will immediately think that, hey, it was what? Gut feel, random, whimsical, and then even if you try to explain, by the time it's too late, the bias is there. And so, for example, I did that when I was naming my successor. Yes, I am retired. I turned 60 actually last year. And now my role as the leader is to groom my successor. And at the time, there were 2 department heads vying for the position. Teledrama, okay? And which one to pick? And actually, each of them had their own supporters. Candidate number one is my operations head. And his advantage is that he has hardcore technical know-how. And of course, he has the command and the heart of the operations people. Candidate number two actually came from sales. And so his advantage is this: he can see the factory as a business. And he knows what the customer wants, and therefore he can tell what the production should do. Not only that, he has this knack for systems and procedures. So he can be like, he can make dashboards, he can make all those spreadsheets which will tell us how we fared. And so, therefore, which one shall I choose? On the big day when all the department heads were there, and I had to make the announcement because I cannot make them wait forever, I first told them the decision making process. I needed one, somebody who's really intimate with the machines. The guy that says, even if I just hear what's the noise, I know something's wrong. The other thing is that I can command people to come on a holiday and work until late night just to fix the problem. And the other thing is that I need somebody who's able to talk to fellow engineers, fellow department heads, and fellow plant managers. And therefore, I appointed department number one, the operations head. By that time, everybody else in the room agreed because they saw the logic. And then, fortunately, department number two was a good sport. And actually, we can have the best of both worlds, which I can tell you later. So remember, if you're a leader, to make a tough call, show them the decision process first and tell them how it was arrived fairly, then give your decision. That's a best practice which you can use and will spare you a lot of agony, a lot of complaints and backbiting. And at least you come across somebody who's decisive, firm, and analytical, the hallmarks of a good leader. Not bad for somebody with a technical background. Now, bonus tip, and I love this particular principle. It is not what is said, it is what is understood. Because we technical people have a tendency to think that I know what I say, I know what I mean, and it's your fault if you don't get what I mean. Have you had people like that? Are you not listening to me? How can you be so dense? But that's not the good approach, because the real approach is like this. If there's a confusion, who was the person who has control of the conversation? You, the sender. So, to be a good leader and communicator, always be aware you have the responsibility for the clarity of your message. It's like Murphy's Law. If something can be misunderstood, it will. And guess who's at fault? Never the receiver, it's the sender. And that's why it's going back to the principle of always be clear. Who will do what when? This is what I mean. And yes, if we talk about technical jargon, in layman's language, it is this, this, this. In fact, there's this particular exercise which will be interesting. There was a king in the medieval realm, and he saw this prisoner sentenced to die. And the king had mercy upon this prisoner. The king told the jailer, kill him not, let him go. And then the next day, the king was surprised. The guy was dead. He was killed. And so he called the jailer, jailer, I told you, kill him not, let him go. And the jailer said, sire, your majesty, I'm sorry, I thought you said kill him, not let him go. See what the real, the point, just one little comma, a decimal point, a unit of measure can also do havoc with your business. And that is where now you have to be aware of your terminology, your language. And that's where another thing is this. Can you explain your process to a 5-year-old? That's an interesting challenge which I'll give also in my workshops. Because the moment that you're a technical person and you are only able to talk in technical terms, but the other guy is not technical, especially if the guy is a customer or you're the boss of your boss of your boss, then there's a problem. And so try to master communications. Go for clarity, go for whatever is positive and possible, and of course, be fair in communicating your decisions. So far, so good. Now, last will be to develop your business sense. And this will be quite surprising because you may be thinking, but I'm a leader of people. But you have to remember, you are leading people in the context of economic realities. Every decision you make, whether it's with people, through people, or for people, carries a certain monetary value. Can be a cost, can be a profit. And that's why, if you want to level up even more, don't just think about metric tons or percentages or efficiencies or percentage defects per million. How much would it mean in pesos? When you have that, you have the advantage over the other people in organization. The technical person who can think in terms of business has the advantage. Let's look at it one way. Here's what I usually tell my people. Sir, here's my technical report, blah, 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 blah. But if you talk to XCOM or MANCOM, they'll always, at the back of their mind, will ask, okay, I hear your technical report, but did we make money? Yes or no? This is not to say that all they care about is money, but if you're a business, of course you have to think about profits. And therefore, what is the relevance of your technical language, your report, your status report, to the overall financial health of the company? That will be the bottom line for certain people. And that's why this particular awareness is crucial if you want to become an effective leader. Aside from dealing with people and process, you have to deal with pesos, payoff, profit. And that will give you the edge to become a much more effective, promotable leader as well. Now, let's hear one example in the, let's say, the manufacturing world, but can also be others. Do you know how to quantify benefits? If I do this, it'll become more efficient. Yeah, but what does efficiency look like in terms of the bottom line? Another thing, you have several options. You know to make a selection. Maybe you buy a machine, you're going to hire an external trainer, you're going to talk about a particular software. Option one, two, three. Which one? Then you may want to boil it down into a commercial scorecard or to look at cost benefit. This is more expensive, yeah, but in the long term, we will save money. That's the kind of thinking. Another one would be, okay, you will get your money back. How long? What's your payback period? What's the return on investment? If you were to ask your senior management, give me 10 million pesos because of this particular need in our technical world, management would ask, what's in it for me? When will I see my money back? You have to be ready with that kind of answer because that's where now you're leveling up from technical to business. And that's where it's like Jerry Maguire, show me the money! That's going to be the mantra for now. Show me the money. All right? And that's where you're going to be more adept in terms of quantifying your thinking, in terms of the language of money. Okay? So, for example, two short examples. If you're in manufacturing, every defective item, every 1 hour of downtime, do you know how much it will cost the organization in terms of pesos? Or let's look at the other ways, not just all losses, but also gain. If I were to improve this process, let's say Kaizen, or let's say I bring a new technology, I upgrade my particular machine, or let's say you're in accounting, you have this new software, or let's say you have this particular CRM, customer relationship management app. How would it improve your firm's finances? And you must be able to quantify it. When you have that, you'll be able to also lead your people towards better working conditions. Now, another one would be like this. It's not just about money. And people think business sense only about money, but there are other ways you can be business-minded. Think of it this way. And I don't know whether this happens to organization. The technical person and the end user, they are in silos. Okay, so for example, I'm a technical guy, I write the software, man, I'm good, I am good, this is a beautiful software, it works. But then if you bring it to the end user tries to use the software, there's bugs, there's delays, there's redundancy, and the customer is angry. And that's why Part of your thinking as a technical person becoming a leader is to think in terms of customer satisfaction. That's another way to become a business-minded person, maybe even an entrepreneur, because what will determine your effectiveness is ultimately what the customer will say. Can be internal customer, can be external customer. So beware. Being business-minded also has to think about what will the customer say. Now, another thing is this company reputation. I really, really admire quality inspectors. There are some moments where, yeah, I wish the quality people will just give us a break. We have this problem in our quality, and then the quality people say, hold, stop, and say, we have to produce, we have to meet our KPIs, stop. And sometimes there's friction between production and quality. I think some of you know what I mean. But here's one thing that I respect of these people. One department head said, you know, it's not just we enjoy, it's not that we enjoy telling you where you went wrong. It's not just we have standards. We're protecting the reputation of the company. Please understand. And when that person, good communicator by the way, gave us that mindset, the why, then we empathize. And we began to work together because we don't want a bunch of defective products going out there in the market. And who knows, we get sued, somebody gets hurt, and therefore we're going to have a lot of bloody product recall. And that's where you may want to become a very savvy leader in terms of protecting your brand, the company's brand, and the trust of the market. When the trust is gone, everything is gone. Your job will be gone too. Now, another thing would be this. Last but not least, you're going to have a business sense in terms of strategic advantage. It's not just counting beans or counting defects. Can you think of something that will make you, your organization, better than or different from the competition? That's the ultimate test. The expert becomes the master. The expert knows the rules of the game, then changes the rules. Can you do that? When that happens, boy, you're a thought leader aside from being a people leader. And when that happens, you're going to be super valuable to your company. And your company will not dare let you go. All right, so we have all those things. Let me give you some helpful tips. These are something which I put in, where hopefully it will also expand your thinking from a technical person, an individual contributor, to become a leader of a team, a department, and maybe one day your own firm. At the start, while you're still young, while you're mentally absorbing, learning, think like a CSO, think like an owner. It's not just you think like a technical guy, think like the owner of this organization. And that brings you a lot of other angles to explore. One example, we have a joint venture with a German manufacturing firm. And the point is that this German guy will share with us their quality standards. And what happens when we try to adapt to their quality standards? We had a lot of rejects. What we thought was okay was not okay with them. So we had to throw away a lot of stuff. And the plant manager was disturbed because it will reflect poorly on him. I'm having a high reject rate. My KPIs are shot. And therefore, he went to the CFO. The CFO said something like this: I'm okay. And after the learning, we will be able to absorb the losses for now. But as we get better and better and better, we will become world class, just like the German guy. And time came when we had to part ways. The JV, the joint venture, was dissolved. Guess what happened? The factory maintained the German standards, and they remain world class. It would be quite easy for the CFO to simply, okay, shut it down, no more joint venture. But he took the long view because he saw it's a short-term pain for a long-term win. That's thinking like a CEO. And that will be how you can learn how to think as a leader, not just a technical person. Another one would be get a mentor. Did I mention that I have appointed my successor? Did I also mention that candidate number two had the advantage of math and systems? Well, guess what? We have the best of both worlds because I told my successor, Mr. Successor, you're great in terms of technical, but you need business sense. Hello? You need the ability to crunch the numbers, make some sort of sensitive analysis because, for example, if our raw material increased cost by 30%, what will happen? You have to crunch the numbers. What effect will it have on the bottom line? Or let's put it differently. If I were to lower prices by 10%, everything else being equal, what's going to happen? And my successor had to think, okay, I know how to quantify in terms of kilograms and percentages and hours, but now this is a whole new thing for him to think in terms of pesos. So what happened? I had to have a mentoring agreement with him. And here's the fun. The fun thing is this. Okay, Mr. Successor will have a common problem. The problem is this. If raw material prices increase by 30%, what will happen? I will crunch the numbers. You, Mr. Successor, will also crunch the numbers. Then let's compare. And if let's say our numbers are the same, you got it right. And we do it three times. If you pass three times, then I know I can let you go. And the interesting thing is that in the first round, he was 99.99 correct. This is an actual email between me and my successor. I congratulated him. You got it right, except for one detail, but don't worry. That was a understandable error. And one of the things that will warm a mentor's heart is to be called, thank you for being a good sensei. Wow, that is like $1 million for me. That you're able to mentor somebody, inspire that person to do his best, to go out of his comfort zone from being just a technical guy to a more business-minded guy. So that then the next time senior management will ask him, did we make money or not? Sir, yes, sir. And here's the reward. Fantastic, wouldn't it be? Now, let's take one more round, and this will be the other item which you may want to explore. Get graduate studies. I mentioned that I graduated from De La Salle University as a chemical engineer. I had my first job. After 3 years, I decided to get an MBA from the Asian Institute of Management. And it was worth it, okay? Because over there, by the way, you'll have to quit your job and study for 2 years. Fortunately, I had a scholarship. That's another story. By the way, big tip. If you cannot afford schooling or certification, get a sponsor. And so what happens when you have an MBA, your world expands because now you talk about not just operations, but finance, human resources, management communications, financial analysis. And here's one thing you have to remember in terms of getting that extra degree, the MBA, the MA, ME, whatever it is. You have to remember that all of this is to make you a better leader and manager. I will always remember what my finance professor said. I'm not teaching you accounting. You're not going to be accountants. I'm teaching you accounting so you can use accounting to make management decisions. You are not going to be accountants. You're going to be decision makers. And the way you make the decisions will be what the numbers say from good accounting practices. Wow. And because of that, I had the best of both worlds, technical and commercial. And that prepared me for my plant manager job. And that's going to prepare you for whatever challenges and promises that lie ahead of you. Let me end with this particular quotation. This is from Dr. Grace Hopper. She's also one of the rear admirals of the United States Navy. She's also, by the way, a computer scientist. Imagine that, huh? Computer scientist, then an admiral in the armed forces of the United States. And she made this very good, sharp insight. You manage things, but you lead people. As technical experts, you manage things, your process, your machines, your spreadsheets, your quality inspection. But when it comes to people, you lead them. You inspire them. You give them direction. maybe even hope that better times are ahead despite this troubled world. And that will be the true mark of a leader beyond the nuts and bolts. Overall, when you now have the best of both worlds, when you know how to manage things and lead people, you will be unstoppable. Thank you very much. And for further resources, these are the three books that will be having career elements to it. Your first job, your career roadmap, and soaring high. This will be my thoughts about how you can be hired quickly, how you can be promoted quickly. What do you do with a difficult boss? What do you do with burnout and all those other stuff? If you also want something more specialized, is this all there is talks about purpose. I understand that the younger people, the Gen Y and the Gen Z and the Gen Alpha, they're after meaning, they're after learning, they're after flexibility. All this particular book can help you. Can give you some ideas. One tip, it's not enough to know your purpose. It's another thing how to maintain your purpose. There are many starters, but few finishers. And if you're also one of those guys who want to understand the generation gap, hello, I'm a boomer, and you have to understand how millennials think. This other thing is something interesting for you because it's co-authored by me, a boomer, and a millennial. It's okay, boomer, tell me why. And then these are the other aspects because happy personal life means happy professional life. And so this will be talking about regrets, loneliness, brokenheartedness, and also about how to grapple with issues of faith. And that's where you can also be able to have a bigger view of life, wherein it's not just the office, it's also the state of your heart, the state of your family. These books are additional resources. And that's where you can find out more if you go to my website. It's www.nelsontd.com and you go to the book section. And for more resources, it is this. It's like, wait, there's more. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Yes, I have a YouTube. It's over there. Please click, share, and subscribe to my social media handles. There's YouTube. I have a ton of data. I have a ton of talks like this also. And also to my LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. And you can always contact me through this particular email, nelsonTD.com@gmail.com. I'll do my best to respond to you. And with that, I give the floor back to the mentors. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience. Please share and spread the word about all these resources. And yes, tell more people about HR Cafe. Bye.